She Will Punish Them is the debut Steam title from L2 Game Studios. It's a sort of Diablo-like action RPG, with many of the RPG elements being developed while the game moves through early access. It's been on my wishlist for a while, together with L2 Game Studios' other upcoming game, Beauty and Violence, Valkyries, mainly because of the gorgeous protagonist, in this case, an angry succubus. Screenshots of the game also showed a very Diablo-like ARPG interface, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy a bit of senseless fantasy hacking and slashing every now and then. The core of the game is melee combat. Yes, it has some missile and thrown weapons, too, but the variety of melee weapons is huge in comparison, and many enemies are fast enough that trying to play a ranged-only succubus is bound to end in tears. With no character development yet available, however, melee combat essentially devolves into swinging your weapon over and over and over again, while occasionally moving to the next group of enemies, drinking a health potion, or dodging out of the way of an incoming attack. Combat in early builds felt clunky and slow, but the developers have addressed that, along with a few other balance issues, in a recent update. So while repeatedly swinging and occasionally dodging is still the only way to play, it at least feels much more responsive and fun now. It can still be quite hard to aim at times, however, and I'd like to see a target lock or similar key implemented to improve this. Different weapon types have different attributes, including a hidden speed attribute that governs how quickly you attack with that weapon, linked to the swing animation. They also have a certain chance to stagger an enemy, what a friend used to call, making them go up, in Diablo, interrupting their attack and knocking them backwards. As you progress through the game, you'll also see occasional damage adders and elemental effects on weapons, such as fire, poison, or lightning, sick. Different enemy types attack very differently, too, though they're roughly grouped into two: melee attackers who charge at you and attack, and ranged attackers who hang back and take pot shots at you from a distance. As you progress further, new and more powerful types appear, too, as well as boss enemies every now and then. What this all means is that, even though combat controls are very simple, it all feels much more tactical than you'd expect. I quickly learned which weapon types worked best against certain enemies, when stagger was important, when to dodge, and so on, though I still often find myself surrounded by fast-moving enemies. Speaking of which, the enemy AI is actually very good, using strategic positioning and flanking to great effect. It doesn't realize when it's hitting its own allies, though, so one useful tactic is to get melee opponents between you and the ranged enemies, and let friendly fire decimate your opponents. The game also includes shields, which I've tried to use a few times. These don't seem to have any useful effect, however, but it's possibly I simply wasn't using them correctly. I tried holding right mouse button to block attacks and seemed to take the same damage I'd taken without the shield. The only real progression that's been implemented in the game so far is based on equipment. As you earn mountains of gold from killing enemies and looting chests, you can buy or find, if you're lucky, more and more protective armor and damaging weapons to aid you in your quest. While the weapons gradually begin to look more wicked and tortuous, as well as adding special effects, improvements in armor don't always look as though they'd be any more protective. Of course, that's nothing new in fantasy RPGs, but there's a pretty good range of armor styles and colors already available, with matching boots, leggings, arm wraps, and sometimes necklaces to round out each set. I don't know if completing a set provides any bonus, but if not, then that would be a great addition to increase replayability. Personally, I think I'd like to try completing this set. Unfortunately, the succubus's inventory is very limited, as is her personal storage chest back in her lair, and you'll quickly find yourself with more equipment than you can store. I found this disappointing because I wanted to take screenshots of my succubus in complete armor sets, but ended up giving up. Storage space was just too precious. There are also a small number of improvements to be made to the succubus's underground lair, again unlockable with gold coins as you play, but most of these seem to be purely aesthetic. They're to provide a little more fan service between fights. It's great that these use your current outfit and equipment, though they do tend to expose some of the equipment clipping issues more than the main game does, but they're sadly not interactive at all, and unlocking all of them only takes a few hours at most. But I have to admit that I'm a little disappointed in the succubus. She's gorgeous, yes, and she's customizable to a degree. A small number of preset face shapes, skin tone and makeup combinations, hairstyles, hair colors, wings, and horns are available, altogether no doubt making millions of possible combinations. But I want more. Her body is not adjustable at all. Her starting outfit looks like a couple of bits of hessian or something, and, worst of all, there's no nudity, and no jiggle. I know. I was shocked, too. In fact, her poses and animations mostly look a bit wooden, though there are a few exceptions. It's another of those cases where the character looks fantastic until she moves. I'd like to see a ton more customization options, more of what's here already, as well as body customizations, and more natural-looking poses and animations. As for the nudity and jiggle, the developers have promised both are coming soon, along with other, adult content, as well. Hooray! She Will Punish Them is a strange one. In its current state it's a titillating repetitive action RPG with fairly limited combat actions and spells, little progression, and lots of bugs, with its primary appeal coming from a nicely modeled main character. It doesn't have any jiggle, nudity, or adult content yet, but it does have a damn hot succubus and some reasonably satisfying, if rather repetitive, Diablo-like combat and equipment progression, when you don't lose it due to the bugs. Sticking with my usual attitude towards early access games, that I can only review what's here, and not what's promised, I have to hold back on my growing enthusiasm for the game a bit. At the moment it's a nice diversion for a few hours, but I wouldn't sink days of my life into it. That said, it's definitely worth a look now, and if the developer's recent performance continues, and some of the game-breaking bugs are fixed, I could see myself becoming rather fond of the game, indeed, after a few more development releases.